and talk a little bit about immunization. How do we create these different vaccines? And then how can we use the basic idea of immune system, of creating antibodies, and the fact that we know we can create antibodies and we can test for the presence of antibodies to know if someone's immune to something and if they've ever been exposed to something. So that's the immune testing. So we've got lots of different types of tests. Most of it's based on antigen binding with the antibody to know if someone's been exposed to something, to know if they currently have an infection. That's all the immune testing. So this, because I was looking at the schedule, I'm like, and we did get farther ahead than I thought we would have, so yay. So I'm expecting this lecture to be a little short, and I'm expecting Wednesday's lecture to be a little short, because I'm going to take this PowerPoint and just divide it up, so I kind of know a good stopping point I want to get to on this PowerPoint. It's right around when we get to the immune testing. I'm not going to get too far into that today. I think I'll just define some terms, and then we'll review and pick it up and finish this PowerPoint on Wednesday. So there's no online quiz you have to take before I see you Wednesday. So our most review that we're going to get through today is just immunizations. A little reminder, a review of active immunizations and passive immunizations. And we talked already at the end of the last PowerPoint of having an active immunity or active immunization versus passive immunization. Just a little review, because I know we'll get to it in one of my slides. Active immunization is your immune system is exposed to something, it mounts an immune response against it, you now have antibodies, and you did all of that. It's active. Your immune system was very active. A passive immunization is when you're given antibodies that were made somewhere else. You didn't actually make them, you're just given them. And we're going to talk about some of the vaccines and some of the things we have out there for stimulating our body to do an active immune response versus passive immune response. The rest of the PowerPoint is immune testing, all these different tests that we can use to know if you were ever exposed to something. We can look for the presence of antibodies. If you have antibodies, it means you were exposed to it at some point in your life. And there's lots of different types of tests to be able to test. And we'll get through those on Wednesday. So, activation, because I know I just said it. This is when your immune system mounts a defense. And so your immune system recognizes an antigen, mounts an immune response, and you make antibodies. So it's that whole step process. Your immune system recognizes antigens, mounts an immune response, makes antibodies. And the passive immunization is when you're given antibodies that were made somewhere else. My comparison, I like my little cow down here, because antibodies have to get made somewhere else. And sometimes in humans, that's through breast milk. But most of the antibodies, if you've ever given a shot of antibodies, they were generally not created in a human. It was generally lab animal. But if you give a vaccine to a cow, they have immune systems too. They will mount an immune response. They will make antibodies. Those antibodies could get passed on to any calves they have through the milk. But we can also harvest and recruit those antibodies and then give those antibodies to somewhere else. Have you donated plasma before, or know people that have donated plasma? I was like, I made it through college using plasma money. But part of those antibodies, they're found in the plasma portion. So although there's lots of things that they are taking from that plasma, why they can pay you for it, because they can sell all of it for like 100 times as much as what they pay you, FYI. They can take antibodies. So people that need antibodies somewhere else, they can harvest them from your antibodies. So if you're given the flu, they can actually get antibodies for the flu. If you were getting tetanus, they can get antibodies for the tetanus. And then they can be used elsewhere in medical fields using those passive vaccines. Now, active immunization, again, these are different things that A vaccine is going to go in, body's going to mount an immune response. So these are all different types of vaccines, and their job is to all mount immune responses. So different kinds of vaccines. The first kind of vaccine that could be given, and some of these at some point you may have been given, is called an attenuated or modified live vaccine. Attenuated means something has a reduced virulence. And you're like, what does that mean? Virulence means it can cause disease. So if you have a reduced virulence, that means that is a pathogen, that is an organism that is now less likely to cause disease. It is still a living organism. So you may be given a live, viruses are not technically alive, a live virus. But it's been changed somehow that it can no longer cause disease. You may be given a live bacteria, but it has somehow been changed or modified that it can no longer cause disease. Some of these, if a bacteria has a capsule, again, that's great for the bacteria. It can hide from our immune system. We can take the bacteria that make capsules, we can actually radiate them, which damages their capsule. And if they don't have a capsule anymore, it's not going to cause disease because our body's going to right away recognize it. And so we can actually give different types of organisms, pathogens, bacteria, viruses, that are alive, but they can't cause disease. And your body will recognize it, mount an immune response to it. And these are usually the vaccines that give us the strongest immune response. And part of that reason is these are still living organisms, and although they may no longer be able to cause the disease, they may be able to replicate in the body for a short period of time. And the more of that organism that's in the body, the stronger immune responses that you're going to have. The attenuation means that it's less likely to cause disease. That's why they call it attenuated vaccines. Downside of these, you get a strong immune response, awesome. Your immune system's going to mount a huge war, going to make tons of memory cells, you're going to have tons of antibodies, you're going to have, awesome protection. But because they are living organisms in the body, even though they're not causing the actual disease they're meant for, they're still living and they may cause a mild infection. Now, every year, where it's like every semester, that's why I like this class so much. Microbiology changes. Microbiology is always in the news. There's always new stuff. And so then all my PowerPoints slightly change on examples and stuff that I give. One of the examples I usually talk about with modified live vaccines, it is an option that you may be given now that it is flu season. There are two types of flu vaccines that you can be given, the shot or the nasal spray. One of them is alive, one of them is not. Any guess which one's alive? Oh, no. The nasal spray. The nasal spray, the virus is still technically alive. It's an attenuated, it cannot cause the flu. Vaccines cannot cause the flu. And it will give you the strongest immune response, but you may start to get some of the symptoms that flu would cause. But you're going to have the strongest immune response against any future exposures. So it's like my kids are always like, please, nasal. They hate shots of any sort. Sometimes they just don't have them in stock and I have to get another shot. One of the other ones that I talk about, I don't generally ever talk about attenuated because it's so not in the news, but it is now. Just since last semester, you probably have all heard of this. I feel like it was in a couple weeks now, but this summer, it was making the news big time, and everyone's like, oh my God, monkeypox. I'm like, oh my goodness, I literally mentioned monkeypox one time, one slide, and you'll see it coming up because it's like, no, don't ever get monkeypox. However, we do have a vaccine. If you've heard of it, only people that are at the highest risk right now get the vaccine. The vaccine for monkeypox is actually the vaccine for smallpox. Just an FYI. If someone gets the vaccine for monkeypox, they're just getting the smallpox vaccine. They are different viruses, but they're so closely related that if you're immune to smallpox, you're also immune to monkeypox because they're so closely related. Smallpox. No one gets smallpox anymore. It's just FYI. No one gets vaccinated for smallpox. There's only been one group in the last, when did we eradicate it? 70s? we get rid of smallpox? I think it was like the mid-70s, we just stopped giving the smallpox vaccine, which is why your grandparents may have had it if you ask them. We don't get the smallpox vaccine out anymore because smallpox doesn't exist anymore. We eradicated it. However, the smallpox vaccine is a live or modified live attenuated vaccine. It is a live strain, but it will not cause, it's attenuated. It will not cause smallpox. The idea, though, is that it gives a strong immune response. We had such a great vaccine. Can't cause disease. But because it is that modified live, people that get the smallpox vaccine, usually right at the injection site, they'll get a pox. They'll get a big sore right at the injection site. And it's a big enough sore, it does leave a scar. So this is why if you ask your grandparents, they may have easily gotten the smallpox vaccine, they will still have a scar. Up until monkeypox came out, the only other group that got the smallpox vaccine, any guess? Because I'm like, some of you might know someone that's actually had the smallpox vaccine and never knew.
What is that? You know how I have older relatives from Mexico. Is that not that?
Nope, but that's it. Yep. But it's not specifically from Mexico. I mean, anyone that's older, because there's still a group that still gets the smallpox vaccine. No, but what group of individuals still gets the smallpox vaccine? Military is the only group that still gets the smallpox vaccine. Any guess why? It's in the whole world. But it's a bonus. Nope, the biggest thing is for biological warfare. The CDC still keeps stockpiles of smallpox because you never know when we might still need to make it. Maybe it would come back. We have no idea. If there's a slight change, we still keep it. So if someone got into the CDC and pulled stockpiles of smallpox is really deadly and it is not a great way to go. And so we vaccinate our military because you never know. They're probably going to be the biggest ones that will possibly get hit with smallpox. The bonus for all the military now that got vaccinated for smallpox, they are now immune to monkeypox. So bonus for them. But it's just it's a modified live vaccine, and I generally don't talk about it when I talk about modified live vaccines because I don't know many people that have gotten the smallpox vaccine. I was chatting with someone the other day that did, though. I'm like, yeah, you can always ask a military person. They will have the scar. Another bonus to getting a strong immune response, another bonus to that attenuated live vaccine is that this vaccine can actually cause, for a short period of time, something known as contact immunity. If you were given this particular vaccine, this is more common with the live viral nasal spray for the flu, you still have that living organism in your body for a short time before your body gets rid of it and develops this whole immune response. Because you have this live organism in your body, when you cough on someone, sneeze on someone, you can actually spread that live modified organism to someone else and immunize someone else. So if you get that nasal spray, feel free to sneeze all over someone's face and be like, you're welcome. Because you could be, for a short time before your immune system gets rid of out of your body, spread that modified flu virus. Again, it's not going to cause the flu, but you could expose other people to it, and then they also develop an immune response against it. Now, not everyone's saying, okay, well, why wouldn't you just always give this? Because, you can do contact immunity, super strong immune response. But there are actually two populations of people, why my picture cut off stuff, on who we would never give a modified live vaccine to. One, someone that's extremely immunosuppressed. Again, the idea is that your immune system has to be able to recognize this thing, mount an immune response it, and get rid of that live organism. Well, if you're extremely immunocompromised, you don't have that capability anymore, which now this modified live organism, even though it can't cause the original disease, it could still start to grow in the body and still cause other issues. The other group that can cause problems with this are pregnant women. Again, their modified organism, although it can't cause disease in mom, it could possibly cross the placental barrier and cause issues for baby. And the baby doesn't have an immune system to mount any kind of immune response against it. So 2 populations we would never give a modified live vaccine to: immunocompromised and pregnant women. And another active immunization, another vaccine, it's called an inactivated or kill vaccine. And this is the most common. It is no longer alive. It can't reproduce, it can't spread. And we group them into what are called as whole agent or subunit. I'm always like, how do I draw this? So if I say a whole unit, it's like the whole bacteria, it's there. And so all the little parts of the bacteria, I'm just gonna, it's not very happy. All the little parts of it, the eyes, the mouth, whatever, the whole outside, the body can recognize all parts of that organism, but it can't cause disease. Subunit is if I took that same, smiley person, and I broke it up a little bit. I just broke it up. It still has all the parts to it. I could push them all right back together. Still has all the parts that could trigger your immune response, because your immune system might recognize that, or it might recognize that, or it might recognize all of them and mount immune responses against every single little part of that organism. So either the whole agent or subunit, either we broke it up. Now, it is safer, which is why we always go with the safe option if we can, and that's because it cannot reproduce. So there is 0 chance it would ever cause a disease. But it does have a weaker immune system response. And the big reason is because the only thing that's in your body to trigger the immune system is whatever was in that vaccine to begin with. So it can't reproduce. So instead of, the 10 bacteria that went in there to trigger an immune response, in a live organism, those 10 would reproduce for a short time and we might have 1,000 bacteria triggering a really strong immune system. Well, now, the only bacteria that can wake up our immune system are the ones that are in that actual vaccine. So there's less organism to trigger our immune system response. So usually these vaccines require multiple doses. Oh, come back in 6 weeks and get your next hepatitis B vaccine, or come back in a couple months and get your next booster. It can help trigger our immune system, as a lot of these vaccines, because they do have a weaker immune system, they usually have something added to it called an adjuvant. And an adjuvant triggers a stronger immune response. I liken an adjuvant to my coffee in the morning. Can I be awake and functioning normally without coffee? Yeah. Do I function a whole lot better with my coffee? So an adjuvant, although your immune system can recognize things and it can mount an immune response, an adjuvant will kind of wake your immune system up so that it mounts an immune response that's usually stronger and faster. Another type of immunization are called toxoid vaccines. So there are bacteria that it's not the bacteria we care about. It's the fact that this particular bacteria makes toxins. The toxins are what kills you. The bacteria won't kill you. The toxins kill you. And so we make vaccines that in the actual vaccine itself, it contains a modified toxin. Again, we'd break it up so that obviously the toxin's not going to do any damage. But it's so that your immune system recognizes the toxin. That if that bacteria ever did get in the body and it started producing the toxin, your body can mount an immune response against that toxin to try to neutralize it so it cannot cause disease. Now, because toxins are quite small, and they don't have a lot of pieces to it. They don't have a ton of different things to really wake your immune system up. So because they are so small, they have so few antigens, they do generally require multiple doses. Two common vaccines that you get that you are vaccinated against the toxin, tetanus, and let me see if I can spell it right, diphtheria. That in both of those, tetanus and diphtheria, it is not the bacteria that will kill you. It is the toxins that those bacteria make that will kill you. Now, what is tetanus and diphtheria usually grouped with for a shot? I'll start with a P, though. What's the next word? It is D. What's the P? Oh, that's the tetanus. Whooping cough. My note, because I shouldn't put this right next to these. Pertussis is not a toxin. That's not the toxin that kills us. So although it is grouped with tetanus and diphtheria, and both tetanus and diphtheria are toxoid vaccines, pertussis is not a toxin, but it still can be grouped very easily with this one. Because my next slide on different types of vaccines we have are combination vaccines, which means in that one shot, it has multiple antigens. So multiple organisms, maybe it's a whole subunit for pertussis, which it is a subunit. It could have some of those toxins that are modified all in one shot. And the DTaP, or it's like the PDAP, however PDAP, TDAP. Bacteria, we'll talk about why sometimes they're capitalized and sometimes they're not. But why we have multiple organisms in one shot. What's another really common one? I know, and I don't know some of those little baby ones, and some of them are brand new. Hold on, I wrote. There's a measles, mumps, and rubella, the MMR. And again, we'll get into all measles, mumps, and rubella when we get. And I know there's another one they're trying to put out that also includes polio and also includes they're trying to get one that has 6 in it now. Yeah, I was going to say, I know it was supposed to come out in 2020, and then I don't know if it actually did because of COVID came out in 2020. But it has 6. So a combination vaccine, it's one vaccine that has, multiple organisms to it. What is the benefit of having a combination vaccine? Easy. As a parent of a newborn, seriously, it's the most traumatic thing ever when those little babies get vaccines and they're like, here, we're just going to keep stabbing them, and they're crying bloody murder because they have no idea what's going on. That in itself could deter parents from getting their kids vaccinated. I don't want to put my baby through that. The baby's not going to remember a thing. But I'm if you can, instead of giving them 3 shots, give them 1. Instead of giving them 6 shots, give them 1. It's a lot easier. It's more likely they're going to get vaccinated because of that. What is it called? Vaccellis? I'm writing that down. Because I'm I wrote it down, a note to myself that I knew there was one coming out, but I didn't write the name. I didn't know if it had come out yet. I think it's tetanus, Hep B, polio, the diphtheria, pertussis, and Hib. Yeah. Again, if you can get it all in one, I would rather get 1 shot than 6. Who wouldn't? Oh, you're a glutton for punishment. Now, ignore the page number. That was, if you had the actual hardcover book. We also create vaccines that use what's known as recombinant gene technology. We know that it's these little antigens, this thing or this part of a mouth or this little eye. These are all antigens that trigger our immune system. Our immune system can recognize all these little parts. We can mount an immune response. We can mount our immune response against that little thing, or maybe that one, or maybe that one. We know that to create this part of the mouth, there is a gene. There is DNA that creates that little antigen. We know that there is DNA that creates that little antigen. We know there's DNA that creates that little antigen. If we know the DNA that can create the antigens, we don't even need the bacteria. We can just get the DNA and put it in some other kind of cell. And that cell, because now it has the DNA to create that little thing, can just mass produce that one particular antigen. So we don't even have to put a virus in a person. We don't have to put a bacteria in a person. We just are putting that particular antigen. So this is showing if we can isolate the DNA, that little green snippet of its DNA, and that little green snippet knows how to make little red triangles. That's the antigen that would trigger our immune response. We can take that DNA and put it inside of any other kind of cell, and then that cell can now make tons and tons of that particular antigen that we can harvest. It allows us to make really fast vaccines and concentrate those antigens. Again, it's our immune system has to be able to recognize those little antigens and then wake our immune system up to it if we ever see them again. Now, this was just the CDC Immunization Schedule. I'm never going to ask you a question about it, of just babies get a lot of vaccines. So some of the ones they get at birth or the first month, they're getting the hepatitis B. Again, they do not give, right when that kid is born, they do not just right away give them a crap ton of vaccines. They give them Hep B though. But then once we start to get, a couple months old, let them live for a little bit before we start giving them lots of vaccines, we really start to vaccinate them. We give them lots of the rotavirus, the DTaP, the Haemophilus influenza, the pneumococcal. Oh, I forgot what IPV was. Oh, I think it is, the polio. I think it's I can't remember what the I stands for though. Inactivated? Yeah, that sounds, yep, thank you. I was going to say, I'm the inactive, because there was an active, we'll get to polio later. An active vaccine that Europe still gives out. That's a lot of shots. So now we're coming up with some of them. What was it? It included the DTaP, the Hib, the polio. Is the nasal, which is good. 2 versus 3, and sometimes more with some of these. And again, then they get more boosters. This is not one. It's, if they don't get them at the 2 months, they get them at 4 months. If they didn't get it at 4 months, they get 6 months. And then they start to get the boosters, which is the yellow. You want the booster somewhere in these timelines. Again, a lot of the boosters is, these are all inactivated. They're not going to create a strong immune response. And honestly, babies don't have the strongest immune system to begin with, so they're not going to mount a super strong immune system response. And so to kind of keep waking up their immune system as it's developing, so that if they do ever get exposed to them, they give them the boosters. And then after, because that goes up to age 6, doesn't mean after age 6 they're done. There are still various vaccines. Again, the green just means at some point in here you probably need a booster for one of these. But we start adding a new one in once we start getting to around 11, 12 years old. We now have the human papillomavirus vaccine for the HPV. That can require boosters as well. And then even though you get up to 18, that still doesn't mean you're completely done with vaccines for your entire life. They definitely want you to get the flu vaccine every single year, and you may still require boosters at some point in your life. Generally, the ones down on the bottom in the purple, these are usually only requiring if you're boosters if you're immunocompromised, that your immune system probably didn't develop a strong immune system response because it's immunocompromised, that we want you to get boosted somewhere on. So, always getting shit. I'm and the one thing that's not up anywhere on here, because it's an older, it's COVID. There's lots of boosters for that. There's always seems to be new boosters. Well, most vaccines are cultured in a lab, and most of them are made in eggs. At least viral disease-causing vaccines are made in chicken eggs. I was why chicken eggs? Well, a chicken egg is one cell. It's a really big cell. Your guys' cells are microscopic. We got to get the microscope out. You saw some of them off when you scraped your teeth. Super tiny. A chicken egg is a huge single. To reproduce, have to get inside of a cell, hijack that cell, and then that cell becomes a virus-producing factory. that is a huge cell. That if a virus can get inside of a chicken egg, that one cell, and hijack it, that egg becomes a massive virus-producing factory. And so, and they're cheap. So we now have really cheap, super big cells that we can mass produce viruses in, and then we, yes, either kill them or modify them so they cannot cause disease. So this is the reason why when you get a vaccine, especially the flu vaccine, because the flu vaccine is made in chicken eggs, one of the questions they ask you is, are you allergic to chicken eggs? And you're always like, what does that do with getting a vaccine? It's because the vaccine was most likely made in chicken eggs. And then if you're like, well, what if you are allergic to chicken eggs? Then what? Can you never get a vaccine? No, that's not the case. So this is the cheap and easy way to mass produce vaccine is using chicken eggs. And the majority of people are not allergic to chicken eggs, but there are some people that are. They can still make the flu vaccine in another cell. It's just going to be more expensive, and your insurance company's not going to like it. But they still make the flu vaccine in other cells as well for people that do have allergies to eggs. So it's just not as cheap. So we always like to go with the cheap and easy method. So some people do have allergies to certain vaccines. Maybe it's because it was made in the eggs. Maybe it's because it was made in some other type of serum. Some people do have allergies to different vaccines. Your immune system might recognize some of these things, and it's supposed to do its normal thing. It's supposed to recognize that thing, and it's going to mount an immune response against it. But some people's immune systems might recognize this thing, and they're like, holy cow, that thing is going to like kill us, and their immune system goes crazy for it and almost mounts too strong of a battle, too strong of a war against that one thing, which is allergies. Allergies is your immune system kind of on steroids. It's going crazy. It's going like overproduction of different types of cells. That's what an allergy is. So some people, so vaccine safety, they always go over what are some possible things that can happen. You might get reddening at the injection site. Again, that doesn't always mean you're having an allergic response. Your immune system still has to recognize something foreign. There's something foreign in your body. It has to recognize it. It has to mount an immune response against it. It has to do all this stuff. And so some people do have some mild toxicity, some type of response to it. Some can have anaphylactic shock. That's when you have a severe allergic reaction to any kind of vaccine. I know when the first COVID vaccine came out, all it took was, 100,000 people all got vaccinated and were just fine, but then one person had an allergic response to it. They're like, oh my God, it's not safe. Or less than 1%. Some people, if you get an attenuated virus, that modified live, might have some slight reaction to it. If you got the smallpox vaccine, you are going to get a pox. You are going to get a big scar, big kind of gross, nasty scar at that injection site because it is a live organism. So you might get some residual virulence for having a live organism in there. But my note on there is no data whatsoever that vaccines cause autism. There's none. There's no data whatsoever. There's opinions, but there is no data whatsoever that vaccines cause autism, diabetes, asthma, or whatever else people have now thought of. There's no data. There was one study that came out, I don't remember what year it was, that said, I think it was the MMR vaccine. It causes autism. And then they're like, and everyone ran with it. There was no data that it actually did that. The person that put out that article that said it did fudged all the numbers. He had his license revoked because he was a doctor. And one of the main reasons that he was doing it was because he had an investment in a new vaccine that would have replaced the MMR. So he's like, no, I don't want anyone to take the MMR because I want them all to get the new one, which he had a vested interest in that company. But everyone went with it, and everyone thinks vaccines cause autism. Not everyone, but a lot of people, it's crazy how many, do think vaccines cause autism. Now, my one note, I'm going to go back a slide. I can see where they're coming from. Because people do put, 2 and 2 equal 4, so it has to be the cause. So most infants are diagnosed with autism around the age of 3, 4. Well, guess what? Up until 4, that kid has been given quite a few vaccines. Up until that age, they're like, oh my goodness, well, my kid has been getting vaccines every time they go to the doctor, and now they have autism, so that must be what caused it. It's bad timing. If they didn't get any of those vaccines, they still would have had autism. They just now maybe didn't live because they weren't vaccinated. It's kind of bad timing. They just associate, well, they had vaccines at the same time they were diagnosed with autism, so they put 2 and 2 together. Unfortunately, there's no correlation to it. They've done enough studies for individuals that have never been vaccinated, because there's lots of anti-vaxxers out there, and those kids still get autism just as likely as those that did get vaccinated. So I only know it. I know for a while there, I'm going to forget the name now that I want to know it. There was a heavy metal that was put in vaccines as a preservatives. Forget it. But there was a heavy metal that was put as a preservative for vaccines, and they're like, well, that's the thing that's causing autism. You're putting heavy metals in my child. That's going to cause autism. They've removed the heavy metal. I can't remember what that preservative name is. They removed it like 20 years ago. It's never been in any vaccines like in the last 20 years. And so that whole idea of that's what causes autism is completely debunked because no one has it in vaccines anymore. Yes, there is a chance that you might have an allergic reaction to it. This is just to show some odds of having an allergic reaction to something like hepatitis B. You know, I like these, the odds of becoming a pilot is 1 in 2,620, 62, but I actually thought that was high. It's kind of likely you might become a pilot. Odds of becoming struck by lightning, 1 in 10,000. Odds of making the U.S. Olympic team, 1 in 380,000. Odds of getting elected to Congress, 1 in 577,000. Odds of becoming a billionaire, 1 in 749,000. Odds of having some type of severe allergic reaction to either the MMR, or hepatitis B is 1 in a million. So those are, of course, the cases that make the news and get over-publicized, that someone has an allergic reaction to something. Generally, if you have had allergic reactions to something in the past, like I have severe allergies to peanuts, or I have severe allergies to whatever, you are more likely to have a severe allergy to any kind of vaccine. I know for a long time, again, when COVID vaccine first came out and it made the news, anytime anyone had a severe reaction, and then they looked back, those exact same people that had severe reactions to the COVID vaccine when it came out also had severe reactions to like any vaccine they were ever given. So it's not like it was a complete surprise that these individuals had severe reactions. It's just their immune system just is a little bit overexcited to anything that came in the body. So everything we've gone through so far, these are all active immunizations, all things that are going to trigger your immune system to wake up, mount an immune response, make antibodies, have some memory cells. Passive immunization is when you are given antibodies made somewhere else. So it's still a vaccine. You're still given a shot, because we're talking just vaccines, just shots. We're not talking breast milk. And the purpose for it is that immediate protection. If you were bitten by a venomous snake, we could give you antivenom, which is the antibodies against various strains of dangerous venom. Limitations, though, so some of the downsides to this, the awesome plus is that it's immediate protection, you don't die. But some of the limitations, usually there's antibodies against a lot of different antigens in that one shot. If you're given antivenom, it's not only not antivenom against just one specific venomous snake. It's antivenom or antibodies against lots of different types of venomous snake, because a lot of times people have no idea what snake bit them, or the snake may have bit them and slithered off and they never even saw. So they give them antibodies against a lot of different types of antigens. And when you put a lot of different types of antibodies in the body, that in itself could wake your immune system up and you can start to get sick. You're not sick that you're going to die, but sick that your immune system is reacting to it. You might get the fever, the tiredness, as your immune system's fighting stuff off. So it's part of what is known as serum sickness, is the fact that your immune system is overreacting to all these extra antibodies in the body. And the fact that these antibodies had to come from somewhere. And so the serum that they came from could also react to it. I'm not going to go back to it, but one of my very first slides, I had the cow. If we immunize a cow, we could pull the blood serum, just the plasma from the blood. We could isolate the antibodies from that cow plasma and then give it to someone else. So problem is, what if my body recognizes cow plasma and mounts an immune response against it? That could make me sick. My body doesn't like it. So it doesn't like extra antibodies. It might not like the actual serum where those antibodies were grown. Limitations, those antibodies do not stay in your body forever. If you're given antibodies, they usually hang out for a couple weeks. The idea is that they go do their job, but they disappear. You don't have plasma cells that are churning out antibodies. You don't have any memory cells that are doing anything. You don't have any future protection against those different things. So if you were ever given antivenom, that doesn't mean you can go out and be like, I can get bitten by any venomous snake ever. They go away. Because we know they go away quickly and they don't offer any future protection, something to help make them last a little bit longer is we are now making things called a hybridoma. I like to break apart words. So what does a hybrid mean? So we have hybrid cars now. What's hybrid mean? They're mixed together. A hybrid car has two kinds of engines. Anything that ends in oma, like carcinoma, means what? Melanoma. Cancerous. And so we're literally going to take two things together, and one of them is going to be cancerous. And you're like, that sounds horrible. Let me show you why. So how we can make hybridomas. Ignore page number. And so if we eject a mouse with some antigen that we want it to produce antibodies against, it will mount an immune response. It will have B cells that recognize the antigen. Those B cells become plasma cells. Those are the big yellow blobs. And those plasma cells are going to make antibodies just like it's supposed to. But plasma cells don't stick around forever, and those antibodies don't stick around forever. However, cancerous cells stick around forever. The idea for a cancerous cell is it just is reproducing uncontrolled. Nothing tells it to stop. If we can take a cancerous cell that doesn't die, and we can fuse it to a plasma cell that knows how to make the correct antibody, we mix a yellow cell and a blue cell together, we get a green cell. I love it when books do this. We get a green cell. We now have a plasma cell that can live forever because it's a cancerous plasma cell, but it's not going to cause you cancer. And this particular plasma cell can now still churn out the correct amount of the correct antibody that we want it to, and it's going to stick around for a whole lot longer in your body. It's not going to stick around just for a couple weeks. It may stick around for a couple months or 6 months, even up to a year, that we have this new plasma cell churning out antibodies. It provides you a lot longer lasting protection. Instead of just having antibodies that go away, we now have plasma cells making lots of antibodies that are going to stick around for longer in the body. It's kind of cool. Now, differences between active immunity and passive immunity. Active immunization, you get a shot and your body's like, oh yeah, okay, I see that. Let me mount an immune response a bit. Let me make antibodies. The line indicates how many antibodies we have. And it makes some antibodies, but not a lot. And we start to get boosters. The boosters are really like, hey, remember that thing? And your immune system's like, oh yeah, I know what to do. And it does start to make a larger number of antibodies. So this is why if you get one shot, they definitely want you to get the boosters to have the strongest immune response, most antibodies in the blood. And the idea is that you are now immune. Lots of antibodies to ever recognize anything in the future. Passive immunization, you get a shot, you get antibodies put in your body, so you've got lots of them, but they go away. There's no future protection. The idea is that they're there to do their job, and then the antibodies will disappear. So active immunizations for that long-term immunity. Passive immunization is when you need really fast immune system response. Testing, I'm just going to define these terms, and that is where I'm going to end today. I'm going to go through immune system tests just all at once. Urology, because I want my term wording. is detecting the presence of antigens or antibodies. Antibodies. I don't know if you need it in your serum, in blood serum. So serology is just looking to see if antigens or antibodies are present in blood, and specifically blood serum. Now I should note, blood serum is very similar to plasma, so I usually use them interchangeable. The only difference is blood serum is plasma without clotting factors. So plasma has clotting factors in it, blood serum does not. But otherwise they're the same thing, so I kind of just use them interchangeably. So serology is just looking for the antigens or antibodies. In our immune testing, is using serology for diagnostic purposes. You can diagnose someone with COVID looking for either antigens or antibodies. Did a lot of antibody testing at the beginning before vaccines came out. Now, if you've been vaccinated, we don't know if you were exposed to it in real life or via the vaccine. Now, direct testing is looking for the presence of the antigens. Looking for antigens. Indirect testing is looking for the presence of antibodies. It's more accurate to tell you what's going on with you right now. Like, do you have COVID right now? Which one do you think is more accurate? Antigen or antibody? Antigen testing, looking specifically for an antigen. An antigen means you actually have, and I erase my little circle, or my little smiley face, like you would actually have part of that virus in your body right now. If you have the virus in your body, it's because you actually have COVID in your body. And that's what's going on. If you test positive for antibodies, does that mean right now you have an active infection? No. It means at some point you were exposed to it. Maybe it was via a vaccine, maybe it was exposed to the actual virus itself. It doesn't tell you what's going on right now, per se, but it at least tells you you have been exposed to something. So this is usually used for diagnosing what's going on right now, and this is usually to tell us what you have been exposed to at some point in your past. So I'll review that, and then we'll finish this up on Wednesday. So there isn't anything you have to do. I'm going to say my little reminder, though. If you haven't already, because I didn't look recently to see who has, Chapter 16 is not a chapter that I lecture on, and it's not part of the next immune system test, but it does have its own separate 10-point quiz. So since there isn't anything due before Wednesday, maybe you want to just get that Chapter 16 quiz done and out of the way. I don't think it's actually due till next week, but it's got to get done at some point. Chapter 16 are all the immune disorders. Like maybe it's the things that cause you to have allergies or any type of autoimmune disorder where immune system attacks itself. Killed my computer.